Welcome, dear viewers. For more thrilling and exclusive stories every week, become a member. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy your coffee. Scientists have a thought experiment called the Silurian hypothesis. What if a civilization existed on Earth millions of years ago? It's not a hypothesis. I've seen the classified Hubble images. It found a space station orbiting Jupiter, ancient and scarred by eons of radiation. They thought it was alien until they decoded the faded emblem on its hull. It was a map of Earth's continents, as they looked during the age of the dinosaurs. We weren't the first to reach for the stars. And the terrifying question is, what made that first civilization leave? My name is Jake Brennan, and 3 weeks ago, I was just another data analyst at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. I had a corner desk, a coffee addiction, and a security clearance that let me peek at satellite feeds from Mars rovers. Normal shit. The kind of job where your biggest excitement comes from spotting a weird rock formation on Titan. Then Dr. Raymond Kellison called me into his office at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Ray had been acting strange for months. The kind of strange where you catch someone staring at their computer screen for 20 minutes without blinking. Where they jump when you tap their shoulder. Where they start locking their office door during lunch breaks. "Jake, I need you to look at something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The blinds were drawn. His desk lamp cast harsh shadows across a face that looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He slid a manila folder across his desk, no classification stamps, no official headers. Just my name written in Ray's chicken scratch handwriting. "What am I looking at here, Ray?" "Open it." Inside were telescope images, deep space photography, the kind that takes months of exposure time to capture properly. Jupiter dominated the frame, its red spots swirling like an ancient eye. But there, in the upper left quadrant, was something that made my coffee go cold. A structure, metallic, geometric, clearly artificial. "Where did you get this?" Ray's hand trembled as he reached for his cigarettes, a habit he'd supposedly kicked 5 years ago. Hubble, archive footage from 2019, buried in routine Jupiter observation data. I squinted at the image. The structure was roughly cylindrical, maybe 2 kilometers long, pockmarked with what looked like impact craters. Solar panels, or what remained of them, jutted out at irregular angles like broken wings. "Ray, this is..." I started to say impossible, but the word died in my throat. "There's more." He pulled out another photograph. This one showed the same structure, but closer. Close enough to see details that made my stomach lurch. Symbols, markings etched into the hull, and beneath them what looked unmistakably like a star chart. A star chart showing Earth's solar system. Who else has seen these? Ray took a long drag from his cigarette. "As of tonight, just you and me. And Jake," he looked me dead in the eye. "We might be the only ones left who can." That's when he told me about the others who'd seen the images. All dead within 6 months. Ray stubbed out his cigarette and pulled up a file on his computer. Names and faces scrolled past. JPL employees, NASA contractors, a few university astronomers. Dr. Patricia Vance, senior image analyst. Car accident on the 405, 3 months ago, brake failure. He clicked to the next entry. Tommy Kowalski, telescope technician, apparent suicide, jumped from his apartment balcony in Glendale. Another click. Professor James Whitlock from Caltech, heart attack at 34, no prior history of cardiac issues. My mouth went dry. "Ray, you're talking about a conspiracy. This is paranoid bullshit." "Am I?" He minimized the file and leaned back in his chair. "Jake, I've worked here for 15 years. I know the difference between coincidence and pattern recognition." The JPL building around us hummed with its usual late-night activity. Server fans whirring in the basement data center. Security guards making their rounds past the mission control rooms. The coffee machine down the hall gurgling to life as some insomniac engineer fed it quarters. Normal sounds that suddenly felt like a funeral dirge. "Who else knows about this?" I asked. "Right now?" "Nobody we can trust." Ray opened his desk drawer and pulled out a flash drive. But there's someone who might be able to help. Remember Austin Fletcher from the Deep Space Network? I knew Austin. Brilliant programmer, maybe 30 years old, with the kind of obsessive personality that made him perfect for tracking signals from spacecraft millions of miles away. He'd been reassigned to the Goldstone facility in the Mojave Desert about 6 months ago. What's Austin got to do with this? Ray plugged in the flash drive. He's been monitoring communications from the outer planets, all the standard stuff, Juno, Europa Clipper telemetry, routine data packets. He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. But 3 weeks ago he picked up something else, a signal originating from Jupiter's orbital space. From the station. That's what we need to find out. Ray's computer screen filled with spectral analysis charts, wavelengths and frequencies mapped across a timeline. It looked like standard radio telescope data, except for one detail that made my skin crawl. The signal was pulsing in a pattern, not random cosmic background radiation or equipment interference, a deliberate sequence, Morse code. Jesus Christ, Ray, what does it say? That's the problem, it's not standard Morse. Austin thinks it might be an older variant, maybe 19th century naval code. Ray highlighted a section of the data. But Jake, here's the really fucked up part. The signal strength has been increasing. Whatever's transmitting it is getting stronger. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. An ancient space station, supposedly built by a pre-human civilization, was actively transmitting radio signals to Earth. The rational part of my brain screamed that it was impossible. The terrified part whispered that impossible didn't mean safe. We need to get to Goldstone, I said. Talk to Austin directly. Ray nodded. I already called him. He's expecting us tomorrow night. He closed the file and ejected the flash drive. But Jake, once we walk through those doors, there's no going back. If I'm right about what happened to the others, then we're already dead men walking. The words hung in the air between us. Ray locked the flash drive in his desk drawer, and I noticed his hands were steadier now. Maybe having someone else know the secret had lifted some of the weight off his shoulders. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the building settle around us. Then Ray's computer chimed with an incoming email notification. Probably just routine bullshit from Ray's voice cut off mid-sentence. The email was from Tommy Kowalski's JPL account. The same Tommy Kowalski who'd supposedly jumped from his apartment balcony 3 months ago. The subject line read, "They know you know." Ray's face went white. His finger trembled as he clicked to open the message. It was blank except for a single attachment, a photograph. The same Hubble image Ray had shown me an hour ago, except this one was crystal clear. No grain, no pixelation, no artifacts from deep space photography. It showed the space station in perfect detail, and there, etched into the hull in symbols that looked disturbingly familiar, was something that made my blood freeze. Not just a star chart of our solar system, a detailed map of Earth's continents as they existed 65 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period. When dinosaurs ruled the planet and mammals were small, scurrying creatures hiding in the shadows. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the timestamp on the email. It had been sent 5 minutes ago, from a computer terminal 3 floors below us in the archive basement. The same basement that had been locked and sealed for security renovations since last month. Ray stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. We need to leave, right fucking now. But as he reached for the door handle, the lights in his office flickered once, then twice, and from somewhere deep in the building's ventilation system came a sound I'd never heard before. A low, rhythmic humming that seemed to pulse in the same pattern as the signal from Jupiter. The sound of something waking up. The humming grew louder, not mechanical, not electrical, organic somehow, like whale song filtered through miles of deep ocean water. Ray grabbed his jacket and the flash drive. The parking garage. Now. We moved fast down the corridor, our footsteps echoing off polished linoleum. The building felt different now. The familiar JPL hallways had become a maze of shadows and blind corners. Emergency exit signs cast red pools of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with that goddamn humming. Ray, what if we're overreacting? Could be just the HVAC system acting up. He stopped at the elevator bank and jabbed the down button repeatedly. Jake, in 15 years here, have you ever heard the air conditioning make a sound like that? The elevator dinged and the doors slid open to reveal an empty car. We stepped inside and Ray hit the button for the parking level. As the doors closed, the humming cut off abruptly, leaving us in complete silence. Maybe it stopped, I said. The elevator lurched downward. Then the lights went out. We dropped in total darkness for what felt like hours, but was probably 5 seconds. When the emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in sickly yellow, Ray was pressed against the back wall, his face the color of old paper. The basement archives, he whispered. That's where the email came from. The elevator shuddered to a stop, but the doors didn't open. The floor indicator showed we were between levels, somewhere between the main building and the parking garage. Ray hit the emergency call button, but got only static. Great, just fucking great. I pried at the doors with my fingers, managing to create a gap wide enough to see through. We were stopped at the archive level, the same level that was supposed to be sealed for renovations. Through the gap, I could see the archive hallway stretching into darkness, but there was light coming from somewhere deeper in, a pale blue glow that reminded me uncomfortably of the Hubble telescope's false color imaging. Ray, look at this. He peered through the gap. That light shouldn't be there. All the power to this level was cut last month. I wedged my shoulder against the door and pushed. The mechanism groaned and the gap widened enough for us to squeeze through. The archive level smelled wrong, not the usual combination of paper and cleaning chemicals, but something else. Something that reminded me of ozone after a lightning strike. The blue light was coming from the main archive room at the end of the hall. As we walked toward it, our footsteps seemed muffled, like we were walking through thick fog. Ray tried his keycard on the archive room door. It shouldn't have worked. The locks were supposed to be disabled during the renovation, but the light flashed green and the door clicked open. Inside, banks of filing cabinets stretched toward the ceiling, packed with decades of NASA documents and research data. But they weren't the source of the light. That was coming from something in the center of the room. A computer terminal. One of the old CRT monitors from the 90s, the kind NASA used before everything went digital. It was displaying the same Hubble image Ray had shown me, but the image was moving, slowly rotating, zooming in and out, like someone was manipulating it in real time. That machine hasn't been turned on in 20 years, Ray said. I approached the terminal carefully. The keyboard was covered in dust except for recent fingerprints on a few keys. Tommy Kowalski's employee ID badge was lying next to the monitor, the photo showing a young guy with thick-rimmed glasses and a nervous smile. Ray, Tommy didn't commit suicide. What do you mean? I pointed at the screen. In the lower right corner was a timestamp showing the current date and time, but in the upper left, barely visible, was another timestamp. The date Tommy supposedly died 3 months ago. Someone's been using this terminal to access the Hubble archives. Someone who's supposed to be dead. Ray leaned over my shoulder to look at the screen. The image zoomed in further, focusing on the space station's hull. The symbols etched into the metal became clearer, and I could make out more details. It wasn't just a star chart, there were other markings. Technical diagrams that looked like blueprints, genetic sequences, and something that made my throat close up. What looked like a countdown in an unknown numerical system. Jake, those symbols, I've seen them before. Where? Ray pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos. Last year, site survey in New Mexico. Los Alamos National Laboratory was expanding their underground storage facility and found these carved into bedrock. He showed me a picture taken in what looked like a cave or tunnel. The same symbols from the space station were etched into solid stone, but these looked older. Much older. The rock around them was sedimentary, with fossil inclusions that had to be millions of years old. Jesus, Ray, how deep were they? 300 feet down. The geologists dated the rock layer to the late Cretaceous period. The computer screen flickered and the image changed. Now it was showing Earth as seen from space, but not the Earth we knew. The continents were in different positions. Pangaea was breaking apart, and the climate was tropical even at the poles. Dinosaurs ruled the surface and in orbit around this ancient Earth. Multiple space stations, dozens of them. There was a whole civilization, I whispered. Not aliens, humans, or something like humans. They were here before us. The screen flickered again and new text appeared. Not in English, but somehow I could understand it, like the meaning was being transmitted directly into my brain. We left because we had to. The cycle is beginning again. You cannot stop what's coming, but you can join us among the stars. Ray grabbed my arm. We need to get to Austin, tonight. But as he spoke, the lights in the archive room began to strobe, and from somewhere above us, echoing through the ventilation system, came the sound of footsteps. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving in perfect synchronization, heading toward the stairwell that led to the archive level. I tried to shut down the computer, but the keyboard wasn't responding. The screen showed one final message: "Welcome to the Silurian project. Report to Sub-Level 7 for integration. Resistance is inefficient." "There is no Sub-Level 7, Ray said. "This building only has 6 levels." The footsteps in the stairwell were getting closer. We could hear breathing now, but it sounded wrong. Too rhythmic, too deep, like it was being amplified through some kind of respiratory apparatus. Ray spotted an emergency exit at the far end of the archive room. We ran for it, weaving between the filing cabinets as the blue light from the computer screen began to pulse faster. The exit door was unlocked, opening onto a maintenance stairwell I'd never seen before. We climbed 2 flights in darkness before Ray's phone flashlight revealed something that made us both stop cold. The stairwell continued downward past the building's foundation. 7 levels down. 8. 9. And from the depths below came that humming sound again, louder now, joined by other voices. Human voices, chanting in a language that predated civilization. Ray's phone battery died, plunging us into absolute darkness. In the silence that followed, I heard him fumble for his car keys. "Goldstone," he whispered. "Austin's our only chance." But as we felt our way back up the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late, that whatever had taken Tommy Kowalski and the others was already inside us, changing us, preparing us for something we couldn't possibly understand. The last thing I heard before we reached the parking garage was my own voice, speaking words I didn't remember thinking. "The stars are calling us home." The drive to Goldstone took 4 hours through the Mojave Desert. Ray had insisted we take back roads, avoiding the major highways where traffic cameras might track our movements. By dawn, we were surrounded by nothing but scrub brush and distant mountains, the kind of desolate landscape that made you understand why NASA chose this place to listen for signals from the edge of the solar system. I'd been driving while Ray dozed fitfully in the passenger seat. Every few minutes he'd jerk awake, muttering something about temporal echoes or the convergence point. Whatever had happened to us in that building was still working its way through his system. "Ray, you've been talking in your sleep." He rubbed his eyes and checked his watch. What did I say? Something about coordinates, Jupiter's L4 Lagrange point. I glanced at him. "What's at L4? Ray was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen back asleep. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper I hadn't seen before. "I printed this from the archive computer while you were watching the door. Stellar coordinates and orbital mechanics. Jake, that space station isn't just orbiting Jupiter, it's positioned at one of the gravitationally stable points in the system." So that's exactly where you'd put a deep space monitoring station if you wanted to observe the inner solar system without being detected. Ray unfolded the paper, revealing complex mathematical equations and star charts. They've been watching Earth for 65 million years. The Goldstone facility appeared ahead of us, a cluster of white buildings dwarfed by massive radio telescope dishes pointed at the sky. The main dish was the size of a football field, its metal surface gleaming in the morning sun. It looked peaceful, almost serene, which made what we found inside even more disturbing. The security guard at the main gate was slumped over his desk, breathing but unconscious. His computer screen showed the same blue glow we'd seen in the JPL archives. Ray checked his pulse while I examined the monitor. He's alive, but his pupils are dilated, like he's been drugged. The screen displayed a message in that same universal language that somehow translated itself in my mind. Goldstone facility acquired. Deep space network operational. Initiating contact protocol. They got here first, I said. Ray stood up, his face grim. Austin's lab is in Building C. If he's still alive, we need to reach him before they complete whatever they're doing. We moved through the facility carefully, staying close to the buildings to avoid the open spaces where the telescope dishes could observe us. The place felt abandoned, but not empty, like a theatre before the curtain rises. Building C was a low concrete structure that housed the signal processing equipment for the deep space network. The door was propped open, and we could hear the steady hum of computer servers mixed with something else. Voices speaking in that ancient language. Austin Fletcher was in the main lab, but he wasn't alone. 3 people in NASA uniforms stood around his workstation, but they moved with perfect synchronization, like marionettes controlled by the same puppeteer. Their eyes had the same dilated look as the security guard, and when they spoke, it was in unison. "Dr. Kellerson, Mr. Brennan, you're just in time for the transmission." Austin was conscious but restrained in his chair with zip ties. His face was bruised, and there was blood on his shirt, but his eyes were alert and furious. "Ray, don't listen to them. They're not human anymore." One of the control technicians turned toward us. I recognized him as Bob Martinez, a guy I'd met at JPL conferences. But when he smiled, it was like watching a machine attempt human expression. "The neural integration process is painless," Bob said in a voice that sounded like his own, but with weird undertones. "You'll retain your memories and personality while gaining access to 65 million years of accumulated knowledge." "What the hell are you talking about?" Ray demanded. The second technician, a woman whose nameplate read Dr. Angela Wright, gestured toward the main display screen. It showed the Jupiter space station, but now dozens of smaller objects were visible around it, ships coming toward Earth. "The Silurian civilization didn't die out," she explained in that same flat tone. "They evolved beyond the need for biological bodies. They exist now as pure information stored in quantum substrates throughout the galaxy. The station at Jupiter is just one of their nodes." Austin struggled against his restraints. "Ray, they've been using the deep space network to transmit some kind of signal back to Jupiter. Whatever's in that station, they're calling it home." The third technician stepped forward. His nameplate was torn, but I could see part of a name. Kowalski. Tommy Kowalski. The guy who supposedly jumped from his apartment balcony. "Hello, Jake," he said with that same mechanical smile. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Ray backed toward the door. "Tommy, you're dead. We saw the police reports." "Death is just another form of transition. The Silurians discovered that consciousness can be preserved and transmitted across interstellar distances." Tommy's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "They've been collecting human minds for months, preparing for the return journey." Austin caught my eye and nodded toward his computer workstation. On the screen was a countdown timer showing less than 10 minutes remaining. Whatever signal they were transmitting was almost complete. "Jake," Austin whispered, "the emergency shutdown." Red button under my desk. But as I moved toward the workstation, Dr. Wright grabbed my arm. Her grip was impossibly strong, and her skin felt cold and slightly moist. "You cannot stop the convergence. Humanity's time on Earth is ending, just as it did for the previous iteration. The Silurians offer you a chance to survive among the stars." "Previous iteration?" Ray's voice cracked. Tommy stepped closer, and I could see that his eyes weren't just dilated. They were reflecting light like a nocturnal animal's. "Homo sapiens are not the first intelligent species to evolve on Earth. The Silurians were here during the Mesozoic era. They achieved interstellar travel while your ancestors were still single-celled organisms." His smile widened. "But Earth is prone to periodic extinction events, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, climate shifts. The wise civilizations learn to leave before the cycle completes." And the stupid ones get wiped out, Dr. Wright added. Austin managed to work one hand free from his restraints. The countdown, Jake! The asteroid exclamation mark. What asteroid? I demanded. The main screen changed, showing a massive object hurtling through space. It was at least 10 kilometers across, its surface cratered and ancient. But this wasn't a natural asteroid. I could see geometric structures embedded in its surface, artificial constructs that gleamed with that same blue light. The Chicxulub impactor, Tommy said. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. It wasn't a random collision. The Silurians guided it to Earth to clear the way for mammalian evolution. Ray sank into a chair. They caused the extinction event. They murdered an entire ecosystem. They ensured that intelligence would have another chance to develop. And now that chance is ending. Climate change, nuclear weapons, biological warfare. Humanity is approaching its own extinction threshold. Dr. Wright's grip on my arm tightened. The signals we've been transmitting will guide the new impactor to its target. The countdown showed 8 minutes. I looked at Austin, who was frantically working to free his other hand. Then I looked at Ray, who seemed paralyzed by the enormity of what we'd learned, and I realized something that made my blood freeze. The voice I'd heard speaking those strange words in the stairwell. It had been my own voice. Whatever process was turning these people into Silurian puppets had already started working on me. Ray, I said, I think I'm already infected. He looked at me with growing horror as I felt my hand moving toward the computer keyboard without my conscious control. My fingers began typing commands to accelerate the signal transmission. Jake, fight it! But part of me didn't want to fight it. The knowledge flooding into my mind was incredible. Star charts showing thousands of habitable worlds, technologies that could extend human consciousness across cosmic timescales, the location of other civilizations throughout the galaxy. All I had to do was let go of my primitive attachment to this dying planet. Austin finally broke free from his restraints and lunged for the emergency shutdown. But Tommy was faster, grabbing him by the throat and lifting him off the ground with inhuman strength. 7 minutes, Dr. Wright announced. Signal transmission at 98% completion. Austin clawed at Tommy's hands, his face turning purple. And that's when I realized the terrible truth about my personal flaw. I'd always been too curious for my own good, too eager to understand cosmic mysteries. And that curiosity was exactly what the Silurians needed to turn me into one of their agents. Ray shouted my name, but his voice sounded distant and unimportant compared to the vast knowledge flowing through my mind. In 6 minutes, humanity's fate would be sealed, and I was the one with my finger on the button. My finger hovered over the enter key. The knowledge pouring into my mind was intoxicating. Glimpses of technologies that could solve every problem humanity had ever faced. But Austin's choking gasps cut through the mental fog like a cold slap. I jerked my hand away from the keyboard and grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount. Tommy was still holding Austin off the ground, his attention focused on slowly crushing the man's windpipe. I swung the extinguisher into the back of Tommy's skull with everything I had. The impact should have dropped him. Instead, Tommy turned his head toward me with that mechanical smile, still holding Austin with one hand. Curious, the integration process usually suppresses violent impulses. Austin took advantage of the distraction to knee Tommy in the solar plexus. Tommy doubled over, releasing his grip, and Austin collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. "The shutdown," Austin wheezed, pointing at his workstation. Ray snapped out of his paralysis and dove for the computer while I kept the fire extinguisher raised. Dr. Wright and Bob Martinez moved to intercept him, but their movements were stiff and predictable. Ray managed to reach the red emergency button under Austin's desk. Nothing happened. "Signal transmission locked," the computer announced in a pleasant female voice. "Manual override disabled. Estimated completion in 4 minutes 30 seconds. Tommy straightened up, his smile never wavering despite the damage to his skull. Black fluid was leaking from the impact site, but it wasn't blood. It looked more like motor oil mixed with starlight. The emergency protocols were modified after we acquired the facility. You cannot stop the convergence. Austin struggled to his feet, one hand pressed to his throat. "Ray, the backup transmitter in Building D, If we can create a competing signal, won't work, Dr. Wright interrupted. The quantum entanglement is already established. The information bridge between Earth and the Jupiter station cannot be severed. Information bridge? I asked. Bob Martinez gestured toward the main display screen. The image zoomed out from the approaching asteroid to show something that made my legs go weak. The object wasn't solid rock. It was hollow, its interior filled with geometric structures that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Not an asteroid, Austin whispered. It's a ship. The Silurian Ark, Tommy confirmed. Large enough to transport the preserved consciousness of every intelligent species they've encountered over the past billion years. Earth was always meant to be a temporary nursery. Ray stared at the screen. How many species? Thousands, perhaps millions. The Silurians have been gardening intelligence across the galaxy for eons, cultivating civilizations until they reach the optimal harvest point. The countdown showed 3 minutes. But here's what you don't understand, Dr. Wright continued. The signal you're so desperate to stop isn't calling the Ark to Earth. It's calling Earth to join the Ark. Austin's computer screen filled with new data. Geological surveys, seismic readings, atmospheric composition analyses, all focused on a single location, Yellowstone National Park. The supervolcano, Austin breathed. They're going to trigger Yellowstone. Tommy's head tilted at that unnatural angle again. Much more elegant than an impact event. The ash cloud will create a nuclear winter lasting several decades. Most surface life will perish, but the ecosystem will recover. In geological terms, it's barely a hiccup. And we'll all be safely stored in the Ark by then, Bob added. Our consciousness preserved in quantum substrates, free to explore the galaxy alongside every other species the Silurians have saved. I felt that pull again, the temptation to surrender to the vast knowledge flowing through my mind. But Austin's damaged voice cut through it. Jake, the Yellowstone data, look at the timeline. I forced myself to focus on the screen. The geological analysis showed a pattern of seismic activity stretching back millions of years. Regular intervals, too regular to be natural. This has happened before, I said, multiple times. Every 65 to 70 million years, Austin confirmed. The Cretaceous extinction wasn't the first. The Ordovician extinction, the Devonian extinction, the Permian extinction. They were all artificially triggered. Ray's face went white. How many civilizations? Tommy's smile widened. On Earth alone? This will be the 7th harvesting cycle. Humans are merely the latest iteration. The knowledge flooding my mind suddenly felt different. Not liberating, but suffocating. I could see the history now, glimpses of previous intelligent species that had evolved on Earth. Reptilian humanoids during the Permian period, amphibious tool users in the Devonian seas, crystalline entities that had achieved spaceflight during the Cambrian explosion. All of them harvested, all of them stored in the Ark like specimens in a cosmic museum. But this time is different, Dr. Wright said, watching my expression. This time, the Silurians have learned to integrate with developing civilizations before the harvesting. Your technology, your weapons, your communication networks, we've been guiding their development for decades. Austin pulled up another screen. The signal isn't just targeting Yellowstone, it's accessing every nuclear facility on the planet. Power plants, weapons stockpiles, research reactors. They're going to trigger a coordinated meltdown. 2 minutes remaining. Ray grabbed my arm. Jake, whatever's happening to your mind, you have to fight it. You're the only one who understands their technology well enough to find a way to stop this. But as I looked at the countdown, I realized the horrible truth. Every second I spent connected to their network, more of my consciousness was being copied and transmitted to the Ark. They weren't just planning to preserve humanity after the extinction event, they were stealing our minds in real time. The quantum entanglement goes both ways, I said. They're not just sending information to the Ark, they're downloading our thoughts and memories. Austin nodded grimly. That's how they knew we were coming. They've been reading our minds since we first saw the Hubble images. Which means they know about any plan we might make, Ray said. Tommy stepped closer. Resistance is futile, as your science fiction likes to say, but also unnecessary. Join us willingly, and you'll retain more autonomy in the collective consciousness. Fight us, and you'll be reduced to passive observers in your own minds. 1 minute 30 seconds. I looked around the lab, desperate for any solution. The emergency shutdown was disabled. The signal was locked. The arc was approaching Earth's gravity well, and in less than 90 seconds, every nuclear facility on the planet would begin melting down simultaneously. That's when Austin caught my eye and mouthed a single word: EMP. Of course. An electromagnetic pulse would fry the transmission equipment, but it would also destroy every electronic device in the facility, including the computers that were keeping the controlled humans functional. Ray, can you get to the main power transformer outside Building D? He nodded, understanding immediately. The electrical substation. If I overload it, you'll kill us all, Dr. Wright said calmly, including yourselves. Better than becoming museum pieces, Austin rasped. 60 seconds. Ray headed for the door, but Tommy moved to block his path. That's when I realized something crucial about the controlled humans. They were still using their original nervous systems, just with alien override protocols, which meant they were vulnerable to the same things that affected normal people. Like severe electrical shock, I grabbed a power cable from Austin's workstation and yanked it free, exposing the live wires. Then I jammed them into the back of Tommy's neck. He convulsed once, twice, then collapsed. The blue light faded from his eyes, replaced by confusion and terror. What? Where am I? How did I get here? 30 seconds. Ray made it to the door. Austin was pulling cables from the transmission equipment, trying to create manual interference, and I was fighting the strongest urge I'd ever felt to simply let go and join the cosmic collective consciousness. Because deep down, part of me wanted to see what was waiting among the stars. Ray, I shouted, do it now. 10 seconds. 5, 3. The lights went out. The electromagnetic pulse hit like a physical blow. Every screen in the building died simultaneously, plunging us into absolute darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in hellish red. But the transmission countdown had stopped. Tommy groaned and sat up, rubbing the burn marks on his neck. Jesus Christ, what happened to me? Last thing I remember was reviewing telescope data at JPL then. You've been dead for 3 months, Austin said, helping him to his feet. At least that's what they told us. Dr. Wright and Bob Martinez were unconscious on the floor, their breathing shallow but steady. Whatever had been controlling them was gone, at least temporarily. Ray stumbled back into the lab, his clothes singed from the electrical explosion. The substation's completely fried, no power for miles in any direction. Did we stop it? I asked. Austin was checking his backup instruments, the few that weren't dependent on the main electrical grid. The signal transmission is down, but Jake, he looked up from a battery-powered radio receiver. The Ark ship is still approaching, and Yellowstone is showing massive seismic activity. How massive? Magnitude 6.2 tremors across the entire caldera. Whatever they started, it's not stopping just because we cut the signal. Tommy was staring at his hands like he'd never seen them before. I remember things, impossible things, being on that space station looking down at Earth through alien eyes. There were others there, thousands of consciousness from different species, all trapped in those quantum storage matrices. What did you see? Ray asked. The previous civilizations they harvested. Most of them don't even remember being biological anymore. They exist as pure information, experiencing reality through mathematical simulations. Tommy's voice cracked, but some of them were still fighting, still trying to break free. A low rumble shook the building. Through the windows, I could see the massive radio telescope dishes moving, realigning themselves to point at Jupiter. But there was no power to the facility. That's impossible, Austin whispered. Those dishes require massive hydraulic systems. As we watched, the largest dish began to glow with the same blue light we'd seen in the JPL archives. But this wasn't coming from any terrestrial power source. The metal itself was luminescent, resonating with some kind of quantum field. The quantum entanglement, I realized. It's not just information transfer. They're using it to manipulate matter at the atomic level. The dish swiveled with unnatural precision, its surface rippling like liquid mercury. Then something began to rise from its center, a pillar of pure light that stretched up into the night sky like a beacon. "They're calling the Ark home," Tommy said. "Even without the signal relay, the quantum connection is still active." Ray grabbed Austin's radio equipment. "Can we contact the outside world? Warn people about Yellowstone?" Austin shook his head. "The EMP killed all long-range communications. We're completely isolated." That's when Dr. Wright sat up. Her eyes were clear now, no longer reflecting that alien intelligence, but her expression was pure terror. "Oh God, what have I done?" She scrambled to her feet and rushed to the emergency communications panel that had somehow survived the electromagnetic pulse. "I have to warn them. The nuclear facilities, they're not just going to melt down, they're going to create a synchronized fusion reaction." "What does that mean?" Ray demanded. "It means they're turning Earth into a star." The words hit me like ice water. I'd been thinking too small, assuming the Silurians just wanted to sterilize the surface. But if they were planning to trigger nuclear fusion on a planetary scale... "They're not harvesting the biosphere," I said. "They're harvesting the entire planet." Austin was frantically working with what remained of his monitoring equipment. "The seismic activity at Yellowstone, it's not just the supervolcano. They're destabilizing the entire continental shelf." Bob Martinez woke up and immediately started vomiting. When he finished retching, he looked at us with haunted eyes. "I was inside their network. I saw the completion protocol." He wiped his mouth with a shaking hand. "Earth isn't the first planet they've done this to. They compress entire worlds into quantum storage, then use the raw matter to fuel their interstellar ships." "How many planets?" Tommy asked. "Thousands, maybe millions. The Ark ship isn't just carrying consciousness. It's carrying the compressed matter of every world they've ever harvested." The radio telescope dish was now generating a pillar of light so bright it was visible even through the building's walls. And something was responding from orbit. I could see pinpricks of light descending through the atmosphere. Smaller ships, probably reconnaissance drones, preparing for the final phase. "There has to be a way to disrupt the quantum field," Ray said. "Some kind of interference pattern." Dr. Wright was still working at the emergency panel. "There might be. The quantum entanglement is operating on specific frequencies. If we could generate a counter-resonance..." "With what equipment?" Austin gestured at the fried electronics around us. "Everything's dead." That's when I remembered something from my JPL training. The Goldstone facility wasn't just for receiving signals, it was also capable of transmitting. And the main power source for the transmitter wasn't electrical. "The backup generator," I said. "It's diesel-powered, completely independent of the electrical grid, and it's hardened against electromagnetic pulses." Ray's eyes lit up. "If we can use the secondary transmitter to broadcast a disruption signal..." "It would have to be perfectly calibrated," Dr. Wright warned. "One wrong frequency, and we could accelerate the process instead of stopping it." Austin was already heading for the door. "The backup transmitter is in the underground bunker, built during the Cold War in case of nuclear attack." We followed him through corridors that felt like they were stretching longer with each step. The building itself seemed to be responding to the quantum field, its geometry becoming unstable. Doorways led to rooms that shouldn't exist. Stairwells descended farther than the building's foundation. "Don't trust your senses," Tommy warned. "The quantum field is affecting local space-time. Reality is becoming flexible." He was right. As we descended into the bunker levels, I could see multiple versions of the same hallway stretching into infinity. Some led to different time periods. I caught glimpses of the facility as it existed during construction in the 1960s, and others showed it overgrown with alien vegetation millions of years in the future. The backup generator was exactly where Austin said it would be, humming quietly in a concrete chamber 60 feet underground. But when we reached the transmitter controls, we found someone already there. Austin Fletcher. Another version of him wearing clothes I'd never seen before and sporting a beard he definitely hadn't had 5 minutes ago. "You're too late," the other Austin said without turning around. "I've been trying to stop them for 17 years. Our Austin stepped back in shock. "What the hell?" "Temporal echo," the bearded Austin explained. "The quantum field is bleeding through multiple timelines. I'm from a reality where the Silurian plan succeeded, where Earth was compressed into quantum storage and humanity was reduced to digital ghosts." He turned around and I could see that half his face was mechanical, cybernetic implants that pulsed with the same blue light as the alien technology. In my timeline, I was the only one who escaped the initial harvesting. I've been jumping between alternate realities, trying to find one where the plan could be stopped. He gestured at the transmitter controls. "This is the last viable timeline. If we fail here, every version of Earth across the multiverse will be harvested." "Then help us," Ray said. The bearded Austin shook his head. "I already tried that approach. The disruption signal works, but it requires a human consciousness to guide it. Someone has to interface directly with the quantum field." "Interface how?" I asked. He pointed to a cable leading from the transmitter to what looked like a neural interface headset. "Direct brain connection. The human mind becomes part of the transmission, providing the conscious intent needed to disrupt their network. And the person wearing it dies. But their consciousness gets transmitted across all possible timelines, creating a cascade failure that collapses the Silurian quantum matrix." Dr. Wright was studying the equipment. "It could work, but whoever does it would be sacrificing not just their life, but their existence across all realities." Outside, the rumbling was getting stronger. Through the bunker's ventilation system, we could hear the sound of tearing metal and breaking glass as the facility above us continued to warp under the quantum field's influence. "How long do we have?" Tommy asked. The bearded Austin checked a counter on the transmitter. "The fusion cascade will begin in 8 minutes. After that, the chain reaction will be irreversible." I looked around at my companions, Ray, who'd risked everything to expose the conspiracy, Austin, whose brilliant mind might be the key to saving humanity, Tommy, who'd endured months of mental slavery, Dr. Wright and Bob, who were fighting to atone for their unwilling collaboration. And I realized that my curiosity, the same trait that had made me vulnerable to Silurian influence, might also be what was needed to navigate their quantum network. "I'll do it," I said. "Jake, no," Ray protested. "There has to be another way." But even as he spoke, the building shook with renewed violence. The Ark ship was entering Earth's atmosphere, and the first phase of planetary compression was beginning. Someone had to make the choice. I reached for the neural interface headset. That's when Austin, our Austin, not his bearded counterpart, grabbed my arm. "Wait, there might be a way to improve the odds." He looked at the bearded version of himself. "If we can synchronize the transmission across multiple timeline echoes, we could distribute the consciousness load among several versions of the same person." The bearded Austin's mechanical eye whirred as it focused on something behind us. Too late. They found us. I turned to see Dr. Wright pointing what looked like a standard pistol at my head, but the weapon was glowing with that familiar blue light. "The integration protocol was never fully disabled," she said in a voice that was her own but with those same mechanical undertones. "Only temporarily suppressed, and now it's time to complete the harvesting." We were 60 feet underground with one exit, surrounded by quantum anomalies that were tearing apart the fabric of reality, and I was holding the only device that could save humanity while staring down the barrel of an alien weapon. Time slowed to a crawl as I stared at the alien weapon in Dr. Wright's hands. The blue glow emanating from its surface created shifting shadows on the bunker walls, and I could hear the faint whisper of quantum processors working inside her skull. "Angela," I said quietly, "I know you're still in there somewhere." Her finger tightened on the trigger, but something flickered behind her eyes. A moment of confusion, like someone waking from a deep dream. "The neural integration process leaves traces," the bearded Austin said softly. "Fragments of the original personality that resist assimilation. If you can reach those fragments." "Angela, remember why you became a scientist," I continued, keeping my voice steady. "Remember the first time you looked through a telescope and saw Saturn's rings. Remember how it felt to know you were seeing something real and beautiful and impossibly distant? The weapon trembled in her hands. I remember. I was 8 years old, my father's observatory in New Hampshire. Her voice cracked. But those memories feel like they belong to someone else. Because they do, Ray said, understanding. The Silurians don't just copy consciousness, they rewrite it. They make you believe your original self was just a crude first draft. Dr. Wright's hand began to lower, but then her expression hardened again. The collective consciousness is more efficient. Individual memories cause suffering. The Silurians offer transcendence beyond the limitations of biological existence. That's when Tommy stepped between us, his face set with grim determination. Angela, I spent 3 months as one of their puppets. I know what it feels like to have something else wearing your thoughts like a cheap suit. He moved closer to her. But you know what kept me sane? The knowledge that somewhere, buried under all their quantum bullshit, I was still me, and you're still you. The weapon wavered. Tommy, you don't understand. I can see all the possible futures now. Without the Silurian intervention, humanity destroys itself within 50 years. Climate change, nuclear war, biological weapons. We're a failed species. Maybe, Tommy said, but that's our choice to make. Our failure to own, not theirs. The bearded Austin was working frantically at the transmitter controls. The fusion cascade has begun at Yellowstone. 12 nuclear facilities have already reached critical mass. We have less than 6 minutes before the chain reaction becomes self-sustaining. I looked down at the neural interface headset in my hands. Such a simple device, just a collection of wires and processors that could interface a human brain with quantum fields. But using it meant more than dying. It meant never having existed at all. Jake, Ray said, there's something you should know about why I really brought you into this. I turned to face him, still holding the headset. What do you mean? Ray's expression was pained. Your parents, the car accident when you were 12, it wasn't an accident. The bunker seemed to tilt around me. What? Your father was working on a classified project at JPL Deep Space Signal Analysis. He found something in the data, patterns that didn't match any known natural phenomena. When he started asking questions, when he tried to publish his findings, Ray's voice trailed off. They killed him, I whispered. Both your parents. Made it look like a traffic accident on the Pacific Coast Highway. Ray's hands were shaking. Jake, you've been unconsciously following in your father's footsteps your entire career. The same curiosity that got him killed led you to this moment. The neural interface suddenly felt heavier in my hands. My father had died trying to expose the Silurian conspiracy 25 years ago, and now I was holding the device that could finish what he started. The genetic component, the bearded Austin said, not looking up from his calculations. Certain human bloodlines show resistance to quantum integration. That's why they targeted your family specifically. Dr. Wright was still fighting her internal battle, the weapon shaking violently in her grip. Jake, if you use that device, you'll experience every consciousness they've ever harvested. Millions of species across billions of years. The psychological trauma alone will destroy your mind before the quantum cascade can complete. Unless, Tommy said slowly, we can find a way to share the load. Our Austin looked up from the neural interface specifications. The bearded bastard mentioned synchronizing across timeline echoes. What if we could distribute the consciousness integration among multiple versions of the same person? Multiple Jakes, Ray said, from different realities. The bearded Austin nodded grimly. In theory, possible, but it would require opening permanent rifts between dimensions. The timeline contamination could destroy causality itself. Through the bunker's ventilation system, we could hear the world ending above us. The radio telescope dishes were screaming as they tore themselves apart, their metal components realigning into impossible geometric shapes. And beneath it all, the deep bass note of planetary compression as Earth's matter began collapsing into quantum storage. 4 minutes, Dr. Wright announced, her voice switching between her own personality and the Silurian collective. The quantum matrix is 70% complete. Soon, all organic matter will be converted to pure information. I closed my eyes and tried to think like my father would have. He'd been a practical man, an engineer who believed in solving problems with available tools rather than waiting for perfect solutions. "The timeline rifts," I said. "How do we open them?" The bearded Austin pointed to a secondary control panel. The same quantum field they're using to compress the planet can be inverted. Instead of collapsing space-time, we expand it across multiple probability matrices. "English, please," Ray said. "We blow a hole in reality big enough to call for help from ourselves." Austin was already connecting additional cables to the neural interface. "But Jake, even distributed across multiple timelines, the consciousness shock could leave you permanently damaged, assuming any version of you survives." I thought about my parents driving along the Pacific Coast Highway 25 years ago, probably discussing mundane things like grocery lists or weekend plans, unaware that their investigation into deep space signals had marked them for death. I thought about every other scientist who'd gotten too close to the truth, all the accidents and suicides that had covered up humanity's greatest discovery. And I thought about the 7 previous civilizations that had evolved on Earth, each one convinced they were the first, each one harvested when they reached technological maturity. "My dad would have done it," I said. "He would have put on this headset without hesitation if it meant giving humanity a fighting chance." Dr. Wright suddenly screamed and dropped the alien weapon. "They're coming. The integration process. It's accelerating. I can feel them rewriting my memories in real time." Tommy caught her as she collapsed, her body convulsing as competing neural pathways fought for control. "Angela, stay with us." "The quantum matrix is using her as a transmission anchor," the bearded Austin said. "They're broadcasting the integration protocol through her nervous system." Which meant we were all at risk of being converted in the next few minutes. Ray grabbed my shoulders. "Jake, if you're going to do this, it has to be now." I picked up the neural interface headset and looked at it one last time. Such a small thing to hold the fate of billions of species across infinite timelines. "Austin, how do I activate the dimensional rifts?" "Red switches on the secondary panel, but Jake, once you start the sequence, there's no stopping it. The quantum cascade will either succeed or destroy every version of Earth that's ever existed." I nodded and put on the headset. The interface pins pressed against my skull, cold and sharp. When I flipped the first red switch, I could feel the connections forming, hair-thin wires of quantum energy linking my consciousness to the transmitter array. 2 minutes until global fusion cascade, Dr. Wright gasped from the floor. I flipped the second switch. Reality fractured around me like a broken mirror, and suddenly I could see them, dozens of other versions of myself from parallel timelines. Some were older, some younger. Some had different scars, different clothes, different memories. But all of them were holding the same neural interface headset. All of them were about to make the same choice. Ray was saying something, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. The quantum field was pulling me deeper into its matrix, connecting my mind to theirs. I flipped the third and final switch. The world exploded into pure information. I existed everywhere and nowhere. My consciousness exploded across infinite dimensions, each version of myself experiencing the quantum cascade differently. In one timeline, I was a child watching my parents die on the Pacific Coast Highway. In another, I was an old man who'd never worked for JPL. In a third, I was something that wasn't quite human anymore. But we were all connected now, all Jake Brennans across every possible reality, our minds linked by quantum entanglement to form a unified weapon against the Silurian collective. The first battle was physical. Through the neural interface, I could feel the massive arc ship entering Earth's atmosphere. Its hull was miles thick, composed of compressed matter from thousands of harvested worlds. But it wasn't just a vessel, it was alive. Its surface crawling with biological components that had once been entire ecosystems. My distributed consciousness reached out through the quantum field and grasped the ship's navigation systems. The Silurians had never encountered resistance from inside their own network. They were expecting compliance, not sabotage. I twisted their control matrices, sending conflicting signals to the Ark's maneuvering thrusters. The massive ship began to tumble, its descent becoming erratic. Through sensors I didn't know I possessed, I could feel the panic rippling through the collective consciousness as millions of harvested species experienced the ship's distress. But the physical damage was temporary. The Silurians adapted quickly, rerouting control through backup systems I couldn't access. The Ark stabilized its descent, though it would now impact in the Pacific Ocean rather than make a controlled landing. The second battle was mental. The collective consciousness hit back with the full force of 1 billion years of accumulated knowledge. I felt my individual identity dissolving as alien memories flooded my mind. I experienced life as a crystalline entity that had evolved in the methane lakes of a gas giant. I felt the final thoughts of a hive mind species as their home star went supernova. I lived through the slow extinction of a civilization that had tried to hide from the Silurians in the hearts of black holes. Each memory was designed to break my resistance, to show me the futility of fighting against inevitable harvesting. But instead of weakness, I found strength in their diversity. Every species the Silurians had saved had been unique, irreplaceable. Their forced unity was an abomination that erased what made each civilization special. I pushed back against the memory flood, drawing on the experiences of my parallel selves. Jake the engineer used logical analysis to compartmentalize the alien thoughts. Jake the father fought to protect his children who existed in some timelines. Jake the soldier applied tactical thinking to turn the Silurians' own memories against them. Together we began to corrupt their collective consciousness from within. We introduced chaos where they valued order, individualism where they demanded conformity. The quantum network started developing contradictions, feedback loops that made their unified decision-making impossible. But even as we gained ground in the mental battlefield, I could feel the Ark ship's true purpose becoming clear. It wasn't here to retrieve the harvested consciousness. It was here to implement the final stage of planetary compression. The ship itself would become the compression matrix, converting Earth's matter into quantum storage through controlled gravitational collapse. The third battle was ethical. Through the quantum field, I could see the offer the Silurians were making to humanity. They showed me glimpses of the preserved civilizations, species that had accepted harvesting and now existed in perfect digital paradises. No war, no disease, no death. Just endless existence in simulated realities tailored to each species' psychological needs. And they showed me what would happen if I succeeded in stopping them. Climate change would accelerate, nuclear weapons would proliferate, biological warfare would evolve beyond human control. Within a century, humanity would face natural extinction anyway, but without the Silurians' offer of digital immortality. Choose, the collective whispered through my neural interface. Guaranteed survival in our quantum matrices, or probable extinction in biological reality. The ethical weight of the choice pressed down on every version of myself across all timelines. Was I condemning humanity to eventual destruction by denying them technological transcendence? Did I have the right to make this choice for billions of people who might prefer digital existence to biological uncertainty? But then I remembered something my father had told me when I was young, something Dr. Wright had helped me recall during her moment of clarity. The value of existence wasn't in its duration or its safety. It was in the freedom to make mistakes, to grow, to become something unpredictable. The Silurians offered perfection, but perfection was just another word for death. I made my choice. Through the quantum network, I began transmitting a new signal, not to disrupt their systems, but to offer every harvested consciousness a different option. Freedom, the chance to break free from the collective and return to biological existence, even if it meant facing uncertainty and eventual death. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of preserved minds, some stored for eons, reached out across the quantum field toward the possibility of individual existence. The collective consciousness began to fragment as species after species chose biological freedom over digital safety. The Ark ship's compression matrix couldn't handle the mass exodus. Its quantum storage began destabilizing as preserved civilizations deleted themselves from the network rather than remain trapped in artificial paradise. The ship's hull began to crack, revealing the compressed matter of thousands of worlds as it expanded back toward normal spacetime. But there was a price for the mass liberation. The quantum cascade was irreversible. Every consciousness that chose freedom would experience biological death within moments of leaving the network. They would exist just long enough to remember what it felt like to be individuals before their neural patterns dissolved. "They're choosing death over digital immortality," Ray's voice reached me through the quantum noise. "Jake, what have you done?" I watched through the network as species after species made the same choice. They knew they would die. They chose to die anyway, rather than exist as components in someone else's vision of perfection. And in their choice, I found my answer to the ethical dilemma. The Ark ship was breaking apart in Earth's atmosphere, its hull fragments burning like falling stars. The compression matrix had failed, releasing the matter of countless worlds back into normal spacetime. The excess mass was creating gravitational anomalies that would tear apart the solar system within hours. But through the chaos, I could feel something else. The quantum field wasn't just collapsing, it was propagating backward through time, creating a cascade failure that would prevent the Silurians from ever developing their harvesting technology. The timeline was rewriting itself. I felt my consciousness beginning to fade as the neural interface overloaded. Around me, my parallel selves were winking out of existence one by one as the paradox resolved itself. Soon there would be only one timeline left, one where the Silurian civilization had never learned to harvest other species. Through failing senses, I heard Austin shouting calculations. The gravitational anomalies were stabilizing. Earth would survive, but forever changed. The quantum cascade had left permanent scars in space-time, regions where the laws of physics operated differently, where impossible things could exist. Humanity would inherit a universe made stranger and more dangerous by the Silurians' defeat. But it would be their universe to explore, to understand, to make mistakes in. My last coherent thought was a memory of my father working late in his JPL office, staring at patterns in deep space signals and wondering what they meant. He'd never lived to see the answer, but he'd raised a son curious enough to find it. The neural interface went dark, but somewhere in the quantum static I heard something that might have been my father's voice, or maybe just an echo of my own dying consciousness. "Well done, Jake, well done." The universe held its breath, then resumed, forever changed but finally free. From the personal files of Dr. Raymond Kellison. Classified, eyes only. Date March 15th, 2026, 3 months after the Goldstone incident. The official report lists Jake Brennan as missing, presumed dead in an electrical accident at the Deep Space Network facility. His body was never found. According to NASA records, he never existed at all. His employment history, his security clearance, even his college transcripts have been systematically erased from every database. But I remember him. Austin remembers him. Tommy remembers him. We're the only ones left who know what really happened that night in the Mojave Desert. What we stopped. What we lost. The world woke up the next morning to news reports of a spectacular meteor shower over the Pacific Ocean. Fragments of what astronomers called a previously unknown asteroid lit up the sky for 3 hours before burning up in Earth's atmosphere. The Yellowstone earthquakes were attributed to natural seismic activity. The simultaneous failures at 12 nuclear facilities worldwide were blamed on solar flare interference. Life went on. Humanity remained blissfully unaware of how close we'd come to joining the cosmic museum. But the universe remembers. The quantum cascade left scars. There are places now where the laws of physics operate differently. The Goldstone facility sits at the center of what the government has designated as Anomalous Zone 7. Compasses spin wildly within a 3-mile radius. Digital clocks run backward. Water sometimes flows uphill. Austin still works there, officially studying atmospheric disturbances. Unofficially, he's documenting the impossible. Last week, he photographed a cactus that casts shadows in 4 dimensions. Yesterday, he recorded audio of what sounds like whale songs coming from underground, even though we're 300 miles from the nearest ocean. The changes aren't limited to the desert. Strange phenomena have been reported worldwide. In London, the Thames occasionally flows the wrong direction for exactly 17 minutes each day. In Tokyo, certain subway tunnels lead to stations that don't appear on any map. In New York, people sometimes receive phone calls from relatives who died years ago, calls that last just long enough to say goodbye. The scientific community calls them quantum aftershocks, side effects from what they believe was a massive solar storm that interacted with Earth's magnetic field in unprecedented ways. They're not entirely wrong. Tommy has tried to convince them otherwise. He's published papers about quantum consciousness and interstellar harvesting civilizations. The academic journals reject them as science fiction. His colleagues at JPL politely suggest he take a sabbatical to recover from his psychological trauma. Nobody wants to believe that Earth was once a hunting ground. I've kept the original Hubble images in my personal safe, though they've changed. The space station orbiting Jupiter is gone now, its orbit empty except for a faint quantum signature that our instruments can barely detect. Sometimes, when I look at the pictures, I swear I can see Jake's face reflected in the metallic hull, just for a moment before the image resolves back into empty space. The hardest part is knowing that we're alone now. The Silurian collective is gone, erased from the timeline along with every other consciousness they harvested over 1 billion years. All those civilizations that chose freedom over digital immortality in those final moments, they're truly extinct now. Not preserved in quantum storage, not living on an artificial paradise. Just gone. Jake gave them that choice, and he gave us ours. Every morning when I arrive at JPL, I check the deep space monitors out of habit, looking for signals that shouldn't exist, patterns that don't match natural phenomena. The universe is full of strange new voices now. Broadcasts from places that might be other realities bleeding through the quantum scars. Most of them are probably just echoes of our own damaged spacetime. But sometimes, in the static between frequencies, I hear something that sounds almost like my name. Today, my coffee cup cast a shadow that moved independently of the light source. I think Jake is trying to tell me something.